Okay, so this week we're continuing our discussion of the Mali Empire, which began to be consolidated in the early 1200s and flourished till the early 1400s, that is, about 200 years. This week we're going to look at an important historical account of life in the Mali Empire written by Ibn Battuta, a North African Muslim scholar during the 1300s. Last week, we looked at the mythical account of the formation of the Ali Empire in the Epic of Sunjata. Historians have suggested that Sunjata's defeat of Sumeoro represents in part the members of Hunter's Guild called Don San Ton taking over power from traditional royal elites represented by the blacksmiths. Given the power of women in the story, some historians also suggest that perhaps it reflects some divisions in whether or not leadership was decided by men or women. That is, was early Mali matrilineal or patrilineal? Matriarchal or patriarchal, or some combination of the two. One thing that does seem clear is that there were some issues with succession, that is, who succeeds the leader after Sunjata's death. We're mainly concerned this week with the most well-known leader after Sunjata, whose name was Mansa Musa. He's known now to be probably the wealthiest man who ever lived. He's represented here on the map called the Catalan Atlas, which you'll read about. And it represents him holding a scepter and a round chunk of gold, and he's wearing, of course, a gold crown. The gold in this manuscript would have come from his empire. Here's just here's the whole Catalan Atlas, the map of the world, just to give you a sense of the scale. And it's right up above me there on the right, the little piece that we're looking at. However, in terms of West African history, Mansa Musa is best known for his Hajj or pilgrimage to Mecca, which he made in 1325. This event was remembered for many, many years after for its impressive ostentation. In the process, he expanded the power of the Mali Empire by establishing trade links with Egypt and by unifying the many different peoples in his lands with Islam as a kind of lingua franca or common cultural bond. At many of his stops on the way to Mecca and on the way back, he would give money in order to have mosques built in the various cities and towns that he stopped at. Why make the Hajj? Well, part of the answer has to do with the 5 pillars of Islam, which all faithful Muslims are supposed to follow. In this case, we're looking at the last one, the Hajj, in red, if possible. You must go on a pilgrimage to Mecca once in one's lifetime. There were other more material reasons, however, that Mansa Musa might have considered for his Hajj. It gave him clout and would support his claims to power. Often men would include or add the word Hajj to their formal name once they had made the trip. As I said earlier, the trip expanded the Mali Empire's access to commercial markets, and it strengthened its ties with Egypt. The Hajj asserted the status of the empire as a trans-regional power, and it spread its global reputation. Certainly, Europe had somewhat inchoate ideas about West Africa, but it was put on notice that a remarkable empire lay beyond the Sahara. Mansa Musa might have had more personal reasons for making this pilgrimage. The Tariq al-Fadish, a chronicle about pre-colonial West Africa written in the later 1600s, says, quote, Musa is the one who accidentally killed his mother, and he was sorrowful about this and regretted it and feared retribution. So he gave large amounts of wealth as alms and resolved to fast the rest of his life. He asked some of the ulama of his time what he should do to be forgiven for this great offense. One of them said, "It is my opinion that you should seek asylum with a messenger of God. May God bless him and grant him peace." That very day, he resolutely made up his mind and he began to gather wealth and provisions for his journey, calling upon the kingdom on every side and demanding supplies and assistance. The Tariq al-Fatish also says that before this that Mansa Musa was virtuous and God-fearing, building mosques, liberating slaves, as if to try to sort of attenuate whatever this accident involving his mother refers to. The size of Mansa Musa's retinue on this journey is a bit unclear to historians, but it appears to have been big. It's thought that he left Mali with up to 60,000 people. On the way back, his entourage and army was only about 20,000. A large number of these people were slaves. Why would you lose so many people? Disease, injuries, maybe some people decided to stay in some of the various places they visited. Who knows? Even more impressive was the gold that Mansa Musa had with him. He spent and donated lavishly on his trip. He was also taken advantage of, however, by people in Mecca, what one scholar calls a perpetual shakedown of Mansa Musa and his entourage. Our primary account of the Mali Empire in the 1300s comes from Ibn Battuta's account of his journey in 1352. He traveled all over the world. We're concerned with his journey on the far left, the red lines on the far left of Africa on this map. He leaves Marrakesh in Morocco and he crosses the Sahara, which he says takes about 2 months. He describes some of the dangers and problems in crossing, like lice, flies, snakes, and devils, or demons that lure you to make you lose your way. He stresses the importance of the takshif, the guide or messenger, who arranges housing in Walata, that is the first city you hit south of the Sahara. But more importantly, the takshif brings water for the last 4 days. If something happens to the takshif, you die. Ibn Battuta finds the inhabitants of Walata, which is part of the Mali Empire at this time, quite strange. He says men have no sexual jealousy. Inheritance goes through the maternal uncle or the person's sister. He says women are not modest because they have male friends outside of their immediate family. He's kind of a prude, I have to say. He provides a couple of anecdotes of meeting with upstanding Muslims who either have female friends or whose wives have made male friends. He moves on to Mali with 2 L's, the capital of the Mali Empire. Archaeologists and historians are still not exactly sure where this site was. Travel narratives often reveal more about the traveler than the place they visit, and we find that Ibn Battuta is very particular about manners. He thinks it's rude when a man protects him from the river where he's urinating, not realizing the dangers of the crocodiles. He finds Mansa Suleiman, who is the current leader, to be miserly. He finds the poetic recitals at which no doubt parts of the Epic of Sunjata would have been performed, to be very silly, especially the bird costumes that the griots wear. And there's an example of that on the right here. He meets some cannibals and observes that they don't eat whites because they don't look ripe. He receives a slave as a hospitality gift, and he comments on the high value put on educated female slaves. He praises Mali's for their small amount of injustice, the prevalence of peace, their meticulous observation of prayers, and their beating their children so they learn or memorize the Quran. Doesn't like that women go naked. He doesn't like this ritual that we've seen before of putting dust and ashes on one's head as a sign of respect in front of the Mansa. And he doesn't like, sorry, it's cut off by my head, he doesn't like these poetic recitals by the griots or jellies. the Mali Empire in the 1300s flourished culturally. Under Mansa Musa, a large mosque and university were built in Timbuktu, and the city became famous as a center of Islamic learning and remains so. Several books were published in the last 10 years on the efforts to preserve the library in Timbuktu, including Joshua Hammer's The Badass Librarians of Timbuktu, and Charlie English's The Storied City, The Quest for Timbuktu, and the Fantastic Mission to Save Its Past. The section on the later empire, Mali Empire, that you read in Toby Green's A Fistful of Shells, the title refers to the cowrie shells used as money and as ritual objects, emphasizes the importance of the gold trade in Mali's continued power. He suggests that the reference to the, quote, 3 measures of gold, often found in versions of the Epic of Sunjata, refers to the continued importance of the gold trade in the Mali Empire's power. And his main thesis seems to be that long-distance trade, which promoted urban growth and political complexity, was already firmly in place before Europeans began to arrive in the late 14 and early 1500s. Finally, I wanted to close, read to you. These are just like sort of the most prominent historical texts on West African history. I wanted to just read you the conclusion of the section on Mali in African Dominion by Michael Gomez. He says, the aftermath of Sunjata's reign saw a succession struggling, pitting the principle of privilege led by royalists versus the proponents of meritocracy, championed by the Hunters Guild, the Dansontan. A remarkable period of stability and expansion ensued under the legendary Mansa Musa, resulting in a West Africa at its pinnacle. Mali was a realm of cities through which flowed rivers of commerce, connecting to Mediterranean and Red Sea worlds in an unprecedented continuity of cosmopolitanism. While tales of transoceanic misadventure are shrouded in uncertainty, a pilgrimage just as spectacular, whose likes had never been seen, introduced to the world the aspirations of a realm in rapid ascent. This dramatic unfolding of West African possibility rested on the empire's unification of the region's 3 major river systems, the Niger, Senegal, and Gambia, heretofore unrivaled in scope, further facilitating integration into trans-Saharan trading network of untold value. Mansa Musa would embrace Islam emphatically, breaking with predecessors by building mosques in key cities, laying the foundation of Mali's reputation as a Muslim land. Islam would soon become a principal cultural signifier, articulating a realm of growing ethnic diversity while compensating for an imperial presence guided by a minimalist theory of government. For all of Musa's accomplishments, he would never fully escape rumors of matricide and intrigue, with Sakura a possible vehicle of remonstration. But in paying close attention to what the sources say, it is as critical to note what they do not say, which leads to the stunning realization that the very zenith of the Malian moment is essentially disregarded in the oral traditions. Even so, in their silence, the traditions reflect brilliance, reinforcing the foundational role of the Sujata epic. And what he's commenting on here is the idea that Mansa Musa, for all of his sort of legendary greatness, has not been incorporated into the various myths and legends of Mali. Thanks for listening. I know that is a bit long.